Hi there, everybody. This is the WFGA Adult Meetup, and it's a great privilege to introduce Professor Nancy Doyle to this meetup on what we think is ADHD Month. So it is a privilege. Nancy is founder of Genius Within, and her work specialises in neurodiversity and disability inclusion at work, and I'm sure many of you have heard of Nancy. She's a leading light and a trailblazer.
Oh, you're being too
Nancy,
kind now, Catherine. So are you.
I
I'm
think,
in good company here.
I think you are, Nancy. Nancy is also a visiting professor with the University of London and has set up a research area within that university, researching the impact of neurodiversity inclusion on the workplace, productivity, and performance. So what Nancy is going to be talking about today is a new piece of research that she's involved in, a double empathy, and what's currently happening in workplace narratives around neurodiversity. So I'm going to hand over to Nancy. I'm going to make Heather the host now. Okay. And over to you, Nancy. And you've got a lot of really interested people here. I'm now going to put you on the speaker. We don't want Heather, we want Nancy. So let's go back to gallery. Okay. Right, over to you, Nancy.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm just fiddling with a slide because you know how right at the last minute your slides just start to just disappear and something goes terribly wrong technology wise. That's what's just happening, but I think I've just sorted it. So let me start. So hello, thank you very much for inviting me. It's really an honour to be here because the Waltham Forest Dyslexia Association's reputation goes before it. It is an association full of movers and shakers. I work quite closely with some of your members, the irrepressible Marcia Brissett Bailey, I'm sure you all know. And Marcia and I have worked together quite a lot over the last few years. And I think, you guys have a really vibrant kind of community, don't you? And so lots of good ideas have come out of that. So yeah, it's a real honor to be here. Thank you very much. So what I was going to talk to you about tonight was some of just the latest research, really, in terms of what's going on in neurodiversity at work research. So I'm really happy to do that kind of quite formally, informally, and to answer questions. I've got some slides. What I thought I'd do is kind of show you some data, and then we'd have a little talk through it. And what's coming up in that data is the idea of double empathy. So does everyone know what the double empathy problem is? Hands up if you'd like me to explain it. Yeah, just over half of you would like me to explain it. Okay, so the double empathy problem is something that was posed by an autistic researcher called Dr. Damien Milton. And he started talking about this over 10 years ago, because as I'm sure you know, the diagnostic criteria for autism and the kind of behavioral observations around autism used to be very much centered around the idea that autistic people didn't show empathy.
It's fine, thank you.
And so we were doing that thing that humans always do, which is where we were looking at things, we were looking at people on the face of their behavior and making assumptions about their intentions from their behavior. So it was very much agreed that autistic people didn't have empathy because they didn't show empathy in the way that neurotypical practitioners and clinicians were expecting them to show it. So Dr. Damien Milton said, well, hold on a second. How do we know that autistic people don't have empathy? Because I'm autistic and I feel very empathetic very often towards my colleagues and my friends. And what he started demonstrating is that autistic people show empathy in a different way. It's not that there is no empathy, it's that the behavior that goes with empathy isn't the same as it is for non-autistic people. So an autistic person might be less likely to sort of say, oh, there, that sounds terrible, and might instead start trying to solve your problem. And so that therefore it's not perceived as empathetic. An autistic person might not make eye contact with you while you're explaining something or saying something that's upsetting to you, but that doesn't mean they're not listening. In fact, it might be easier for that autistic person to listen if they're not making eye contact with you, because autistic people report that eye contact is quite intense. So, actually, they're being very empathetic and listening really well by not looking at you. So he started doing some research, and what he found is that when he put people in pairs, autistic plus autistic, they would actually report that each other to be very empathetic. So when the behavioural codes were matched, there was no difference in the amount of empathy reported by autistic pairs versus non-autistic pairs. But when you mixed the pairs, then it was reported a lack of empathy, but it was reported both ways. So the autistic people are finding the non-autistic people just as lacking in empathy as the non-autistic people have found them. And at this point, Damien's kind of going, well, hold on, this is a double empathy problem, because actually non-autistic people do not have empathy for autistic people, because non-autistic people are always trying to get autistic people to behave as if they are not autistic. But autistic people aren't behaving non-autistically because they don't want to. They're behaving that way because it's harder for them. And so why are we so lacking in empathy that we're trying to make a vulnerable group of people who are quite often disabled, challenged in the way they communicate, to communicate in a way that they don't like, even though they've probably got less resources in the situation than we do? Where is our empathy as clinicians and practitioners for autistic people? And this was a really brilliant critique. And what it kind of set up was this sea change in the way that we started to think about communication norms and how much we judge people's intentions by the way they behave. And this is pretty pervasive. It kind of goes through so much. I want to play a little game with you, and James, you'll have to bear with me because I know you've played this game before, but I want to play a little game with you to really kind of get this point across. So it's a really easy game to play because there's no way to get it wrong and there's no way to fail. So all that happens, I'm gonna say something, and then all you have to do is notice what happens in your head. And some of you will feel comfortable to talk about that, and some of you don't have to, so that's fine. Okay, so literally, I'm going to say something. Notice what happens. Are you ready? See an elephant. So what kind of elephants have you got?
Little ones from Sri Lanka.
So Heather has got little elephants from Sri Lanka. So when I said see an elephant, who did something different to Heather?
I saw a giant C because you emphasised the C first, and then I was like, now I'm supposed to be seeing an elephant, but I'm actually seeing a giant C.
Brilliant, brilliant. That's lovely.
I saw a great big elephant from Wild at Heart, which I used to watch with my late father, my mum. So it kind of brings back all those memories. So yeah.
Oh, lovely. So that's so can you hear how these are quite different? So little elephants, the letter C, and then Andrew's got, quite a detailed memory about an event that happened and kind of a family connection. Linda, what did you want to say? What kind of, yeah.
I felt a bit guilty because I didn't see anything.
So
No
what
matter how
happened
hard
for
I
you?
tried, nothing. It just
Yeah.
nothing happened.
So
And I haven't
so
got
in,
a wonderful memory or it didn't
yeah.
invoke anything with me. It was just, and then I thought there's something wrong with me because I can't
Okay.
do that. And I felt bad about myself a bit. And then I thought, why am I doing that? Is it required that I see something? So
No,
that's how I
it's really
felt.
not. No,
Yeah.
so no, it's really not. So you're not seeing an elephant, so you're just then having a conversation with yourself in your head
Yes.
about the fact that you can't see an elephant. Okay.
And feeling bad about it because I felt that I wasn't conforming. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. And I always tell people it doesn't matter what you do, there's no way to get it wrong. But
Yeah,
if it doesn't quite work, people want to conform, don't they? People want to fall in
yeah.
and do
I
do
want
what's
to please
expected of
you as
them.
well. There was an
Yeah.
element of me wanting to please you. So I thought, well, I'll
Yeah.
invent something. But actually, that's not the truth. There was nothing.
Well, I'm glad you stuck with the truth because that's way more interesting. So thank you, Linda. So what are you noticing when we're having these conversations, when we're sharing these elephants?
We're all very different, basically. We're not alike, basically.
No, we haven't got the same elephant yet, have we?
No.
James, what did you want to say?
The elephant I saw was an elephant I saw at Colchester Zoo, not quite in the public place, but round the back, rocking to and fro in absolute boredom.
Okay, so as James is describing his elephant, put your hand up if you've made a picture of James's elephant. Yeah. So just notice how you do that. As you've made those pictures, you'll have put some detail in that he didn't give you. You might have put plants in the area, or you might have decided what time of day it is. It might be night or dark, or you might decide what the weather is, whether it's a sunny day or a rainy day. And so those sorts of things are happening, whether we like them or not. D.
He's currently on mute.
Sorry, I was just putting my hand up to indicate I had
Ah.
thought of something with the last question. Yeah.
I see. Yeah, it was a virtual hand in response to my question. I am sorry. So yes, so all of our elephants are quite different, and we go into quite a lot of detail. And I think it's worth just resting on this point because it is actually quite profound that the only thing I said was see an elephant. And the diversity of thought that came from that very short, simple, concrete instruction was quite vast. So if we talk about something like empathy, that's going to be even more vast, right? So if I say empathy, it's not a concrete noun. It doesn't mean something that you can see or hear. So if I say the word empathy, what does empathy mean for you? What comes into your mind when you think of empathy? Again, that will be quite vast. So but we don't wander around thinking that, do we, as humans? We wander around thinking that when we speak, people know what know what we mean, but they don't always know what we mean. And sometimes we're holding on to loads of detail that we haven't shared with people, and we're assuming that we know what they mean. So let me do let's just do another couple of senses and just notice what happens for you. So hear an alarm.
I heard an alarm, a physical like burglar alarm going off.
Mm-hmm. So a burglar alarm going off. Whose alarm is not like that?
School alarm for when I was little, actually, bizarrely, like from primary.
A
They're very
school alarm
loud
from when you were little, a primary. Okay.
Really loud.
Oh, James is showing us an alarm. Lovely.
I'd got one of the ones where I could just hear it going woo woo woo, and I don't quite know exactly what sort of alarm it was, but yeah, it was definitely spinning round, and yeah, I could actually see the little bulb going round.
Okay. I'm curious with you, Linda. Did you have a representation of a noise this time, or was nothing happening for you this time as well?
I have hearing loss, and I had a memory rather than my fire alarm went off, and I wasn't aware I couldn't hear it, and I became aware when a whole load of very burly firemen turned up at my house with a hose. I was very embarrassed. So I'm actually going red with embarrassment as I was thinking about it. But again, I didn't have any sounds in my head. I feel more comfortable saying that now. But I did have a memory around an alarm that I didn't hear. Does that make sense?
And when you had that memory, what sense did it represent itself to you in, Linda? Was it a feeling? Do you remember the image of the fireman coming in or out? What sense did you use?
To be absolutely honest, I think it was really funny. It became quite fast-like and funny. but my neighbours were trying to climb over the fence. I was actually at the bottom of the garden meditating. It was the weirdest experience of my life. And I find it funny because it was funny. It was a bit like a carry-on film, but actually wasn't. And it was useful because I didn't know, I couldn't hear it. So in an odd sort of way, it kind of may potentially save my life in the future, that I now know I can't hear these things. So we had all our alarms changed, and I see the flashing light now. So yeah, so it's lots of mixed feelings, but embarrassment's pretty high up there. But but that's kind of a life experience. I can't hear alarms on ambulances or police cars either.
Okay.
So I have a heightened awareness as a result, because we compensate, don't we? And maybe that's more of a thought than anything else that was going on. The assumption that people think that you can hear, and that you can see. If you're in your own world, you're not going to see that blue light until it's almost on top of you. So I had 2 police cars go past me today. I saw them before any of the other drivers did, and I was pulling over beforehand. It annoyed them.
So much came up for Linda in that, but not hearing the alarm. So we've got school alarms, we've got the memory of fire alarms, we've got James's little alarm in the box, lots of different alarms. So the same thing is happening, big diversity. I say something simple, you all do lots of different things. Feel ice. Hands up if you can do that. Hands up if you've created a context in order to feel the ice. So you know what kind of ice it is. Is it a fridge or a glass of gin and tonic?
Yeah. -40 in Moscow, 1982.
Interesting time to be in Moscow.
Lovely time to be in Moscow. 60th anniversary of the Union of the States, actually. It was brilliant.
Wow. And then hands up if you just got the feeling, a cold feeling of ice with no context. Yeah, so that was you. That was for you, Alicia. Thank you. Yeah, couple of people. Nice. So relating this back to empathy and the double empathy problem, one of the things that I'm quite interested in researching is how we help organizations manage the relationships that they have with and between their staff. I've always been interested in that, but my company Genius Within, where I work, we have about 60 employees and about 200 associates, and nearly 70% of us are neurodivergent. So that's quite a lot of different types of thinking happening. And just for record as well, you're not having all this diversity of thought because you're neurodivergent. I have played this game with managers. I've played it with groups of people who are long-term unemployed. I've played it in schools. I've played it, in lots of different environments, mainly neurotypical, mainly neurodivergent, mix of both. This is just how humans are. So if this is my kind of basis of understanding how much we actually really understand of each other, when you start thinking about how do we communicate across difference, it's actually quite complex, and it has quite some quite big impacts. So I just want to show you my slides, and I'm going to ask for your forgiveness because I planned these earlier and then I decided to do something slightly different. So I'm going to be flicking back and forth through them rather than showing them in a nice, neat order. But it's ADHD Awareness Month, so I just beg for your forgiveness in that. And perhaps you'll accept that my ADHD brain likes to think in the moment rather than plan. So where are we? There we go. So let me go from where I want to go from. The little black bar is now in front of the oh.
Let you drag it down or not?
Are you still seeing my slides?
Yeah.
There you are. Good. Okay. Okay. Slideshow. from current slide. So this is some research that I did this year with Birkbeck. We were asking people in a survey about what were strengths, what did they think neurodivergent strengths were, and what did they think neurodivergent challenges were. Sorry, you're looking at the challenges. So this is some of the strengths. And the purple line is how the neurodivergent people were rating themselves and their neurodivergent strengths. And that's a broad mix of neurodivergent people, including ADHDers, autists, dyslexics, dyspraxics, a full range. And we actually looked to see if there are any differences between the different neurotypes, and there really aren't very many differences at all. The differences will be things like, that if people will be less likely to say literacy if they're dyslexic, and they might be more likely to say literacy if they're autistic. So, there's slight differences as you would expect, but not really that many. And then the green line is when we asked their employers what they thought neurodivergent strengths were. And then the blue line is when we asked colleagues what they thought strengths were. And this is one I want to draw your attention to. So resilience and tenacity.
Low.
Yeah, so the colleagues do not think that resilience and tenacity is a neurodivergent strength. Broadly, it's less than 50% of them that are giving that rating. And there's a statistically significant difference between the number of neurodivergent people who think that they are resilient and tenacious versus the colleagues who think they're resilient and tenacious, if you're picking that up. And then apologies, I haven't changed the slide title, but this is now a comparison of challenges. And this is what the neurodivergent people say their challenges are, compared to the neurotypical colleagues. And as you can see, there's a big difference there as well. And some of the differences are things that we really know that these are neurodivergent problems. So if you look at working memory, I mean, we all know about working memory, right? That little old chestnut gets in the way of acquiring literacy, gets in the way of remembering lists, gets in the way of just generally bumbling about the world and trying to not get too many parking fines, or leave too much stuff in the car when you're coming in, or that kind of thing. But, as you can see, the colleagues do not think that that is a problem, and the neurodivergent people do. So we've got this kind of very different experience. Neurotypical colleagues do not see the challenges that neurodivergent people are having, and therefore they do not rate us as tenacious and resilient because they actually still can't see the challenges that we've got. Does that make sense?
Yeah, total sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd say that, things like, you have an appointment. I used to have an appointment for dyslexic assessment at uni, and people would get quite cross with me for the fact that at 8 o'clock in the morning, even though they weren't due in until 10:30, I'd ring and wake the student up. Because I'd say, where should you be later on? They go, oh, God, and rush out to get a bus from Balham or something,
Yeah.
It's not they didn't want to be there, because they kept saying all this, 3 strikes and you're out. Third time, if they don't turn up, they can bugger off. And I said, but you're addressing, in a dyslexic, there's 2 key things: your phonological, and then there's your short-term memory, and you've addressed their key weaknesses. So for me, we must always be on remember it's a Wednesday, remember you're coming to see all this sort of thing is our thing. And in fact, we are disabled in ourselves if we cannot deliver that. It's like saying
absolutely, and people do not understand the strength of a working memory deficit. I remember being at I was at a disability conference once, and I was on a panel, and one of the panel members was a wheelchair user, and we were talking about working memory, and she said, but we all struggle with that sometimes. And I said, what you've just said to me is the equivalent of me saying to you, we all struggle to walk sometimes.
Yeah.
So yes, that's true. We do all struggle to walk.
We all have memory issues, but not like
that.
But
we're not all wheelchair users, and we do all struggle with working memory sometimes when we're tired, when we've got baby brain, when we're in menopause, you know, lots of things can drain our working memory, but that's not the same as being a neurodivergent person with a working memory deficit. So I think it's quite stark that you can see these differences coming through in the survey data. And in that same research, we asked some questions about conflict, and we had the same disparity. So when we asked whether there were good conflict resolution processes in the organisation, the neurotypical colleagues were more likely to say yes than the neurodivergent people. When we asked if there was psychological safety at work, the neurotypical colleagues were more likely to say yes than the neurodivergent people. So there's a very different experience at work happening between neurodivergent and neurotypical people. And I think this is starting to come out in some of the other areas that we see. So so we're asking about fairness and justice, and we're getting different opinions there. And we're asking about kind of you know, inclusion processes. And what we're starting to see is that, you know, people are less inclined than they were to want to do inclusion work. So we've had I don't know about you, but neurodiversity got popular, didn't it, about 5 years ago?
Yeah.
So yeah, after 20 years of kicking the door down to get people to think about neurodivergent people as possibly having strengths occasionally, you know, finally the door got kicked down, and there was this sort of gold rush about neurodiversity. And now I think we're potentially in the place where we're going to start seeing a backlash.
Yeah, we're scurrying backwards any more than
Yeah.
the SEND stuff today, you know, from government, which is, you know, peanuts to what's happened from my point of view. You know what I mean? It's like dyslexia when it first started, you know, when you got the report in the very beginning for higher education, which is when I first got involved, and there wasn't, you know, there was no SFE help. I was bloody sending everything off to the individual education officer. That's how low it was, you know. So I went from 40 students when I entered the dyslexia coordinator post to being 850, you know, by the time I left. So massive. But then all of a sudden, the quality of delivery, I don't know if everybody's noticed this, but Catherine certainly noticed this, that all the stuff that we pushed for, did, and everything else started to go on the slide. And it started with the abandonment of skill as the National Bureau for Disability. When that closed down, it was like a signifier. Oh, do you know what? We don't have to do all these games. It was as if we've done enough now. We've slapped it's like I say in a school, and I go in as advocate, you know, that for neurodiverse people, that you slap the label on, oh, that's it now, it's done. They've got a label slapped on it, they've got pupil premium.
I know, and that should be the beginning of the story, not the end of the story.
And now what? And what's your menu? What's on offer? Who does this, that, and the other? And that's where the collapse is. You know, they think you're right now with a label on the head. And that's it.
So let me show you some more statistics of what the sort of things that we're finding out. So I've been doing research into the impact of coaching for a very, very long time. And what I have found consistently since 2011, I started doing this research with dyslexic clients. I did my PhD looking at the impact of coaching as a support for dyslexic employees. And one of the things we do is we sort of measure before and after. What topics do you want to do in the coaching? And, you know, how do you rate yourself now, and how do you rate yourself after the coaching is finished, just to get a kind of, you know, distance traveled measure. And the topics that people want to cover have stayed the same since 2011. So that's 75% wanting to look at communication, 68% wanting to look at time management, 68% wanting to look at organizational skills, and 74% wanting to look at working memory and concentration. So it's very executive functions heavy, and it has been since I started collecting this data in 2011. But look at that little thing down the bottom. So we you know, stress and well-being also used to be a popular topic. It was 60%. So it was lower than the executive functions, but it was a constant at around 60%. And that was before the pandemic. Since the pandemic, 90% of my clients want support with well-being and stress. That is so different. And that's the clients that are getting support, by the way. That's the clients that are getting support in the workplace. They must be getting support, otherwise we wouldn't be coaching them. So, you know, it's a big difference of what people are experiencing now to what people were experiencing just a few years ago. And you can also see that in the well-being data. So this is the scores for the 990 employees that filled out the survey who were neurodivergent. And you can see that those scores are incredibly low. This is a standard well-being questionnaire that we that is used by the UN thing that does health.
World Health Organization.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So this is their standard questionnaire. So we can compare this to other cohorts, and these are really low scores. Really low scores. Like, you know, so if one of my employees was giving me scores like this, I would be thinking about some sort of intervention, because you know the average score is less than 3 across 990 people. And when we compared these scores to neurotypical colleagues, what we were quite interested to go, is this everyone in the UK? Is everyone in the UK just really miserable after the pandemic? But when we compared it to the neurotypical employees, they were kind of, they were the same, you know, they were the same for sort of, my life is filled with things that interest me. I felt cheerful and in good spirits. I felt calm and relaxed. But then when we got to active and vigorous and woke up feeling fresh and rested, there was a massive difference. So the neurotypical employees are around 3 for that, 2.89, 2.93. But the neurodivergent people, it's our sleep. It's our physical health and our sleep. And I remember doing a study in 2015 looking specifically at insomnia with dyslexic people. And I found that there was a statistically significant difference with reported using the general insomnia scale, that dyslexic people had much higher levels of insomnia than the general population. So this kind of, you know, environment is actually making us quite unwell. And yeah, you know, there's also we found a gender difference in that as well. So I mean, the male's average score is still low, you know, that's not good, 2.75. But then when you look at women and non-binary, it's even below 2. So there's some intersections there that are happening. So let me carry on through this. Hold on. So what I wanted to talk to you about next is kind of how do we do this at Genius Within, because we're a weird case study. I'll come to you in a minute, Andrew. I've seen your hand, but I just want to go through some slides and then I'll come back to you a discussion, if that's all right. So I think of Genius Within as being a very odd little case study, because we are so neurodivergent and because we're now a reasonably sized business. How do we do it? How do we have a low turnover? How do we have kind of engagement? How do we keep each other safe? Because if I can work that out, then I know what to teach employers. So my own company has become my research focus, if that makes sense. Yeah. I've started doing ethnographic studies and writing up reports of how we do things, what our operating model is as a business. And we're not just neurodiverse, we're actually quite diverse in lots of ways across the business, with very high representation of people who've been minoritized, particularly in leadership. And our representation from the global ethnic minority is much higher than the average from the UK as well. So we've got a really kind of interesting group where pretty much every single one of us will have at least one marginalizing characteristic, if not 2, and sometimes 3. And we've been using this model for a few years, which is where we have a method of unpicking misunderstandings. So when there's a misunderstanding at work, we don't just kind of let it go. So if you've got kind of grumblings at the water cooler, we take that as seriously as someone losing their temper in a meeting. And we go, okay, where's the grumbling come from? What can we do to support you? What's going on? So if that grumbling happens, you know, more than a couple of times, we will work on it. And one of the things we've been doing for years now, it's very related to this double empathy thing. So here's how we separate out information. So normally what you would say as a piece of feedback to someone is, I thought you were a bit aggressive, you were a bit bossy. I thought she was aggressive. I thought she was bossy. We probably don't say that to people's faces, do we? We say that behind their back. Yeah, he was aggressive, she was aggressive. I didn't think she was polite. I could tell that she was doing something else on the video call. That's the kind of thing you would hear in a workplace. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, bit of grumbling. So when we hear that sort of thing, we go, right, what was actually presented? Let's just check. Is that definitely what happened? So if someone speaks faster than their colleagues and they move quite a lot when they're speaking, are they always trying to steal the show and make people annoyed or offended? Or could there be another intention behind their behavior? If you're thinking that someone in a video meeting is doing something else because their camera is off, does it mean that they're doing something else and that they're not interested in the meeting? Or is it actually that they find faces and eye contact quite intense and they wanted to devote their listening ability to the call? When someone sends an email with one line and no greeting or a sign off, are they being impolite or angry? Or are they in a hurry? Which is true? And we teach all of our staff to work through this stuff in detail. We do the elephant game with everybody, and we get some agreement that what you see and hear isn't the same as what people are interpreting. And then we use this process to break down double empathy issues. And we go, how can we resolve this double empathy issue? Because what we know from years of working together, and generally the kind of people that come to Genius Within as employees, is that nobody really gets up in the morning with the intention of upsetting someone else. No one goes, right, I'm going to go to work today, really annoy Nancy. I'm going to work today, and every time Nancy speaks, I'm going to steal the show. So no one is doing that. So if we're feeling something like annoyance or worry, or thinking that we weren't interested or we've been offended, if we're having that impact, it means that there's an misunderstanding somewhere. So we spend a lot of time working through those misunderstandings. And that's how we use the double empathy problem to inform us and to work through those feelings. Because the other thing that we know about majority neurodivergent staff teams is that we're actually also more likely to have rejection sensitivity. We're more likely to have a kind of hostile attribution bias. We're more likely to be biased into thinking people are being hostile to us because we've experienced hostility and ostracism. And also lots of us have that justice sensitivity thing that some neurodivergent people have, where everything's absolutely fair or absolutely not fair. And it's absolutely right or it's absolutely wrong. So we need to create structures to maneuver people through and to help create a process that people can navigate those double empathy clashes without having a relationship rupture and without kind of it being the be all and end all and them getting into a loop where they think that their colleague is deliberately trying to harm them at work. So Andrew, I'm going to come to you, and then I just want everyone to have a little think about that, and then maybe you've got some questions for me or some thoughts. Andrew.
Yeah, so my question was, have you looked at like sleep? Sorry, that's better. Yeah, I can see now. Yeah, so yeah, I was just quite curious about in terms of sleep and neurodiversity whilst grieving. So my father passed away 18 months ago, and on average, I'm getting an hour and a half to 2 hours less sleep. And I was wondering whether that's something that can be like a common theme. And also in terms of what you were saying about the camera, so because I work remote, if a university student, when I'm training them how to use assistive technology, doesn't want their camera on, it doesn't bother me. And it's something that, because I also do kind of the staff training, some people make a big deal out of it. If someone's listening and at the end of the day, the students learn how to use a computer program, am I bothered? No, as long as they know how to.
Am I bothered?
No, I'm being flippant, but if they can use the software package, that's what I was there being paid to do. So, is the camera the be all and end all? And is age a factor? Because I was 41 on Friday, and I've noticed kind of upwards from 35, things obviously do change in terms of less sleep and so on. So it was just like a curiosity kind of question.
So there's kind of two questions there for me. One is on sleep and one is on double empathy. So in terms of sleep, it is yeah, and happy birthday, Andrew. And my condolences for your loss as well. So so the sleep thing is repeated in lots of different neurodivergent communities. Like it's something we all have in common,
Okay.
that we sleep worse than our neurotypical
Yeah.
counterparts.
Yeah.
And you see a lot of this, and I don't know why it isn't a health crisis. So I have a 7-year-old non-verbal autistic niece who doesn't sleep for more than 3 or 4 hours at a time. And I cannot believe that no one has seen this as the health crisis that it is. You know, if she should
Yeah.
have a pediatrician, someone should be finding out why she can't sleep. She should be getting NHS prescribed melatonin. She's not. We have to go to America to get a melatonin for her, which we
Oh,
don't mind
wow.
because
Yeah.
lots of our relatives are American, but that's beside the point.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, I think part of it is potentially sensory sensitivity. So I don't know about you guys, but I've got bat ears. I used to not sleep when I was a child because the noise of the trees outside my bedroom window was too disturbing. But by the same token, you know, you could have an earthquake and I wouldn't feel it, if that makes sense.
But
So I've
then
got
what about though the environment? Because like I've lived
yeah,
here like I've owned this flat, shared ownership for 4 years. And during the first sort of 2 years,
yeah,
Dad was alive and I'd got into my kind of work routine. Yes, we were COVID and what have you. But in terms of like the environment, nothing has physically changed because like I've
yeah.
lived here on my own and I've got my dog. My partner doesn't live with me as yet, but that might happen soon. But in terms of if it was environmental, I could understand, obviously, kind of from a scientific point of view, because nothing has changed other than, obviously Dad's died, but he never lived here with me. This is a 1-bedroom flat. And so
But lots of things
obviously,
affect sleep, Andrew. So,
yeah,
you know, sensory sensitivity can wax and wane through our lifespan depending on how
yeah,
stressed we are. So the more
yeah.
stressed we are, the more fearful we are, that the more
Oh,
heightened our senses can be. It can also change based on our diet and our routine.
mm,
And, you know, so there's lots of reasons why it might change, particularly as you get older and your health starts to change. And
so kind of
you've been
like with my
through
mum,
quite a traumatic experience, so that's going to have a big impact. So I
yes,
think, you know, what we've got to remember basically is that as a group, we're not neurodivergent people are not well. We're quite
mm,
sensitive. We're the canaries in the mine shaft in that, you know,
yeah,
we'll respond and react physically and
yeah,
psychologically often before our neurotypical counterparts. And
mhm.
we need to and we're not necessarily understanding what each other is what's happening in each other's brains. So when I started studying psychology, I was just also falling in love with my husband, who is I'm still married to, I'm very pleased to tell you. But when we first moved in together,
Yeah,
we used to try and do the best for each other. So
yeah,
if he'd had a hard day at work, I used
yeah.
to do what I would like to happen if I've had a hard day at work, which is to talk about it. So if he'd come
Okay,
home
yeah, yeah,
having had a
yeah.
hard day of work, I would follow him around the house trying to talk to him about it. But that's not what he likes. So
I can just imagine.
if I'd had a hard day at work,
Yeah.
he would come home and I said, "Oh, I've had a terrible day at work," and he would leave so that he could give me lots of time to process my hard day. And so, without meaning
Oh,
to, with the best of intentions, we were
yeah.
actually doing exactly the opposite of what each other needed. Now, because of what I was studying and I was doing
Oh,
coaching
yeah,
training,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I worked this out and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
had a conversation with him and we
yeah,
learned how to support each other. And you know, he's quite an interesting one as well. So if he's looking at a TV or a computer screen, he can still
yeah,
listen to what I'm saying. So I used to say
yeah,
to him, "Why aren't you listening to me?" And he would be like,
yeah.
"What are you talking about? Of course I'm listening to you. But if I'm looking at a TV or a computer screen, I am not listening to you. I can tell you that right now. So we've got these kind of we're making assumptions about each other all the time, and those assumptions are based on what's happening in our head. They're based on our elephants. So because I can see an elephant, when I say see an elephant, I assume everyone can see an elephant, but actually some people can't see elephants at all. Some people are having completely different experiences. Some people are seeing the animals, they're seeing the letter C. And so we wander around the world thinking that people are making sense of what we say in the same way that we intend them to interpret it. But actually we're all having these very different experiences. And so I think the way out of this double empathy problem is to slow down the way we communicate. Yeah, it does relate to your love language. Yeah, it does. Yeah. Yeah, is your love, yeah, and my husband's love language is acts of service. So he'll empty the dishwasher to cheer me up. It does not cheer me up. It really does not. But yeah, bless his heart. But it is endearing, and I do find him adorable. So I've lost my thread now because that's really funny. But yeah, I think the way
you were saying about looking after the dishwasher for him, you know, it's something that
Thank
you
you,
really
Andrew.
likes. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So I think the way through this double empathy thing at work is we've got to create structures that allow us to slow down our communication, and to when something goes very wrong, stop and think. And unpick what's actually happened and go back to, well, what did you intend to happen? Because that's not what's happened. Oh, so your intention was this. Okay, so my interpretation was this. So how can we then move forward? So I'm just gonna mute you, Andrew, because we've had quite a lot of comment from you, and I think it's someone else's turn. So let me ask the rest of the group, what comments or queries do you have from what I've said and what the research that I'm doing and my research interest? What's your thoughts? What's on top for you?
Can I just ask, hi Nancy again.
Hi,
Dee.
Dee.
Hi. What I forget his name, but the doctor who did the research that
Damien Milton.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was he asking people, or what was he presenting the two groups with to get to know whether, you know, to get this theory on double empathy? What kind of things was he asking?
Do you know, I don't know actually. I'd have to go and read the original research papers, or you could. But there's been lots of studies on it since, and I think with the one that I'm thinking of with the pairs of autistic and non-autistic kids, they were kids, and they were just playing with each other for like half an hour, you know, and then they were asking questions like, you know, did you think this person was kind? Did you think this person was fun to play with? Did you think this person was listening to you? You know, and so you're kind of going around empathy. And yeah, the matched pairs thought very highly of each other, and the mismatched pairs did not. James, what are your thoughts?
Okay, a couple of things. Dr. Milton's paper is actually linked at the top of the chat.
Oh, well done. You're so good at that stuff.
Well spotted.
Yes.
You really are.
Now, I do actually have a bit of a double empathy problem at work. I will try to speak in broad terms because I do not wish to identify the individual or individuals involved. But there's an individual who is very much not my mold, and sometimes when I comment on things, and Nancy, you will understand that I will comment on all kinds of disability access stuff and so on and so on and so on. Also, things like I don't drink. So when I go to a works function and discover that there is free wine to the amount that one of my colleagues ended up redecorating his bathroom, but if I want a soft drink, I have to pay the standard bar charge. You can imagine how annoyed
I
one could
imagine that
be,
triggers your justice sensitivity, and rightly
yes.
so. Yes.
So
So what's your question, James?
the question is how to address how I have communicated with this particular manager, and the manager sometimes not picked up on the nuances. For instance, we got in some new um, as some new hot water dispensers in the tea points, which have got a touch screen, completely flat. The previous ones had got lots of buttons and a great big lever.
Yeah. So for visually impaired and blind people, it's
Yes.
going to be, yeah,
Yes.
absolutely.
So
are you wanting to know how to kind of explain this in a way that isn't going to cause offense?
yes, because previously I did put a note in and I said what would happen when you have and the manager involved then asked HR, asked occupational health, and said there'd be all these great big assessments, but not actually noting the nuanced question. They still wouldn't be able to independently make their own cup of tea.
Yeah, so I think, you know, giving feedback in the way that I've described, where you separate the action from the interpretation, is a useful place to start. But so is feed forward. So
Yes.
saying what would work better rather than just what's not working is usually a good
Yes.
way to get that across. But I think one of the so I've explained to you how I'm working on this at Genius Within. And the thing at Genius Within is I can make it part of our company rules and part of our values and part of our contract that we have with employees. And so I've kind of got everybody signing up to this kind of communication style. What I haven't been able to do yet as effectively is work out how to transfer it into spaces where that isn't the norm, where it's considered normal for people to just go off and whinge about each other and complain about each other without doing anything about it, where, you know, a problem doesn't automatically come into a solution focused mindset. But what I know from working with my clients over many, many years is that if you're able to suggest a solution and it falls on deaf ears, and that happens again and again, then you're not in a great workplace, and it might be better for you to try and find somewhere else to be. So let's go to Simon, because we've only got a couple of minutes left.
Hi, Nancy. You were kind of sort of like, my question was kind of like what you're talking about. And I was sort of interested in when you were talking about unpicking understandings at Genius Within. And I just wondered if you could go a bit more into detail how you do that. And are there any organizations? I mean, obviously, I imagine with Genius Within, we're saying that you've got 70% neurodivergent, and your business is about mental health and neurodivergence. So what you do at Genius Within, but also, are there any examples of organizations that don't work in that field? How would you suggest that other organizations go around that approach that you have at Genius
Bear
Within?
in mind, it's not the fact that we all do this that some of us do this for a living that makes it work. Because I've got 5 people in my finance team, 2 people in HR, 4 people in a digital team, 7 people in a client services team, and 7 senior managers, only one of whom is a psychologist, and that's me. So it isn't the training it's not the fact that people are coaches or psychologists that enables them to do this. It's just as easy to teach finance people or HR people or client services people or sales people. Yeah, I've got a sales team. So that's not what makes it work or not work. What makes it not work or work is whether people are authentically signed up to this process, if they're actually emotionally invested in doing it, if they want to do it. And if they want to be in a solution focused space, if they want to work through those misunderstandings, occasionally we hire people who think they want that and then they find out that they do not. because what they didn't realize is that in signing up to a culture where you debrief problems, that also means you have to be accountable. So when you have inadvertently upset somebody, it doesn't mean you don't have to say sorry. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to kind of work on changing something so that you don't upset that person again, if you see what I mean. So lots of people think that they can come into that culture and then, you know, they just get to do what they want and say what they want and it'll be okay. And it's not. So that level of accountability is what predicts whether this passes or fails. And so where I have trained it quite successfully to management teams, it's when you have the right buy-in, because if I don't do it at work, that it'll fall immediately. If me or our CEO or our COO stop doing it, if we make it something that everyone else does but we don't have to do it, that's it. It'll never work again. It has to be authentic throughout the whole team. I have to be able to say sorry when I mess up, when I let people down, when I say something that's too harsh and they felt it too deeply, when I forgot to do something in the right order and it made people confused or worried. You know, I have to own that and apologize immediately. And when somebody gives me feedback, I have to accept it, whether I like it or not, whether I intended it or not. I have to go, thank you very much for bringing that to me. It's really helpful. Let's work through it. And not like, well, that's not what I meant. Do you know? And so it requires a leadership team who are totally committed to that. And you don't find those very often.
Isn't it like teaching? Is it very much? I think it's like teaching. At the end of the day, if you know, 5 of your students didn't actually get it, it may be they have a particular, you know, they're not difference. Even if it was like I was looking earlier on, you know, 1% that were Tourette's, with which I'm not that familiar, and you know, they may need additional assistance. But the point is, you know, if it's you know, the vast majority, like 85% of your students not grasping it, well, hello. You know what I mean? In terms of teaching observation or assessment, and which I've done, taught PGCE, you know, I'd say, well, you're not getting it. You're not reading the room. That's your point. You know, emotionally, you're not reading the room. But also, I think what you're trying to do, which I find brilliant, is to teach a language of emotion.
Yes.
That's the key feature. It's perception and communication. And if I think of my absolutely triage, full on, couldn't mistake him for, you know, mild, you know, in the old days, Asperger's syndrome, full on autistic nephew, now sort of 33. But I mean, I remember with him, what I used to love to do if we got a bit of park space or anything else, was to let him do what made him feel really happy, which was to flap.
Yes.
Flap seen as antisocial, like, you know, pointing your hand like this.
Well, this is it.
Tippy toes.
It's
like
a perfect example. Yeah, it's a perfect example. Where is our empathy for the fact that that autistic child is trying to soothe his nervous system, and those things soothe his nervous system? So we would rather stop him from doing that and have his nervous system in a state of distress because it makes us feel a bit odd. Like, forget it, you know. That's a perfect example of the double empathy problem, and well done you, Heather. But that is what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is teach a language of communication, a language of communication about communication, if that makes sense. So we're kind of trying to come meta to communication and go, what's happening in this communication? Not what is this communication, but what are the patterns? What are the patterns that are happening in this communication that means that we're not understanding each other? Where do we have to go to re-establish rapport and connection?
Yeah, I mean, Noah Maushlitz talked about emotional intelligence, and I did a little bit of work with him at LCF, and I think that's all part of it in the same way, isn't it? Like Gardner, multiple intelligences. We've just reached, for me, this sort of peak where we think we're communicating, but actually COVID has shown us all that we're even further from it than we thought. That you think that, you know, everybody's this relatively normal, and then you're thinking, goodness me, they're feeling as bad as I do.
I think emotional intelligence is a really good topic to bring up, because it's kind of it's a bit of a tricky subject for neurodivergent people because everyone thinks that we're not emotionally intelligent because sometimes we lose our shit. But you know,
I
we
see
lose our,
that as emotionally intelligent. You let it
yes,
go.
and we
Let
lose our
it
shit after an
go.
intense amount of provocation usually,
Yeah.
and a sensory overwhelm, and you know, various things that other people aren't experiencing. But so I think when I'm consulting with businesses, I see three different types of workplaces. You've got the workplace where they're not helpful at all, bit like James was describing. They'd rather you just shut up, sat down, didn't stick your head anywhere where it wasn't wanted, and did exactly what you were told, like some kind of automaton. And you've got workplaces where they want to be inclusive. So what they're doing is that they're infantilizing neurodivergent people. They're saying, don't worry, you don't have to do this. So we'll make it really safe for you. So you won't have to do any of these things. And if you're a little bit upset, you know, you just carry on being upset. We'll just let you be upset. And, you know, you go away and be upset and come back. We're not going to talk to your colleagues about how to stop that from happening again. But we'll go there. And what happens in those workplaces is that neurodivergent people don't get to thrive. We don't get to build our careers. We don't get to do work that would allow us to explore our talent potential. And sooner or later, we get pretty much ostracized because we're not participating in reciprocal team dynamics. And then what I'm trying to create is what's the option? If those are two extremes and they're like a kind of rescuing mummy versus you've got the manager as mummy metaphor, or you've got the manager as the mean bullying daddy, you know, those kind of stereotypes of power. So you've either got the dominant hierarchical power, or you've got the kind of, you know, there, let me do it for you power, neither of which are actually very empowering or helpful. What's the alternative? How can we have adult to adult workplaces where nobody is the child and nobody is the parent? How can we kind of go, well, let's just talk to each other about what's just happened? And that's the model I'm trying to get across, is the model where the neurodivergence doesn't mean you never have to say you're sorry. But it also means if something goes wrong for you and you're upset or something's happened, we have to work out how that happened and work on preventing it from happening again. And we take it seriously as a team, and we go, well, we don't want that to happen. How can we work together differently so that you aren't so stressed that you're forgetting everything and having to apologize to everybody all the time, or so stressed that you've walked out of a meeting in a big grump and now you've got to apologize to everybody. Let's not have that. So let's forgive you. Let's have you repair the relationship, but also let's do preventative work, because that just feels like a way to be adults in a workplace. And I think, you know, neurodivergent people can lead this, because our experience is that we have to work our way around this all the time, because we're expected to do things that do not come naturally to us. And so we're constantly having to work out the psychology of people who are not including us. And kind of, so I think there's something really rich in there, that if we can get a, you know, a chaotic ADHDer like me who likes to be spontaneous and do whatever she thinks of at the time, work 70 hours and then go to bed for 2 weeks, to work with an autistic who likes routine and predictability, who finds it very destabilizing when the rules are broken. If we can get those two people to work together, what can we teach the workplace? Does that make sense? I think we'll find some magic in that.
Yeah, definitely. How to utilize the time when one is not is resting, someone else is working, probably on some other areas, maybe their strengths.
Yes, yeah. Totally. So my colleague Fiona is a different neurotype to me. She's more of a slow thinker, an ordered person. She likes routine. She likes compliance-based stuff. And we make decisions very differently. I make very quick decisions in the moment, and she likes to think things through. And when we first started working together, I would ask her for some input on a decision, and she just wouldn't get back to me. And I'd be like, And what she's learned to do is say, Nancy, I need 2 days to think that through, or the weekend to think that through, and then I'll come back to you. And as long as she gives me that holding email, I've got enough respect for her to give her that space, because I know if I give her that space, what she will come back with is insightful and deep, and she's less likely to change her mind than I am. So sometimes it's really useful for me to be in charge and making a quick decision. And sometimes it's really useful for us to stop and go, let's go with Fiona's way of working. So you have to have respect for those differences. We can't be like one is better than the other. We can't be hierarchical. We can't be going, this particular pattern is the best pattern, and if you can't do it the way I do it, there must be something wrong with you. We have to be going, you know, that pattern is really useful in those situations, and this pattern is really useful in these situations. And if we make space for each other and respect each other, then we'll have the right type of thinker for the right type of problem whenever we as we go through the business day, or the, you know, the business cycles.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I mean, it says, I think it says anything between 8 and 8:30. Are you okay, Nancy? To continue?
Yeah, I'm okay. I'm enjoying chatting to you all. You're
Good.
interesting and clever and insightful and curious, and I like chatting to you. This is a treat for me to talk about the stuff I really care about with people who are just as interested and find it. Yeah.
I think an ADHD strength, and I'm sure Andrew would agree, is the fact that you're passionate.
Yeah,
that's how I feel about it. I'm still as passionate at, you know, the age now of 46 years later in teaching, still passionate about our pedagogy. I can't help it. It's because if you're not, why you're there? Why you're here? Why bother? You know, to me, if you don't want to spread the message, people to improve and life to be richer. I was thinking about what you said, and I hope you'll forgive me for this, but if I might forget, I don't say to you, you're saying about your niece. Did you say she was 7 or 8 and not sleeping?
7, yeah.
7. My autistic nephew he never slept for 10 years. And he had, you know, everybody in it had full assessments. And my sister, it was like she said, being in one of those films, like a Western, like she used to set up all these cushions around in the living room. And she was like, you know, being attacked by the Indians who were running around in a classic funny movie. And it was him running around. And he'd just fall over for a bit. But then, for a bizarre reason, best known to Frank, at 11, he stopped doing it.
I know that can very often happen. One of my good friends is Professor Jason R. Day, who didn't speak until he was 11, and didn't read and write until he was 18, and now he's a professor at Cambridge.
Because you're not ready. It's not ready.
Well, she's actually a Gestalt language processor, so she does scripting. Do you know what I mean by scripting?
Yeah, I do. Yeah,
she's so cute. But yeah, I think, so I can't remember where we were before that. So yeah, anybody else want to come in? So we've heard from a few different people. Anybody that hasn't kind of asked or said anything yet that wants to come in?
I hope I've admitted enough people. Every time I saw a little thing, I have done that. But I think Sadia said there was some sort of problem at some point. But I only can do what I see on the screen. I'm sorry.
That's all right, Heather. Don't worry about that.
Oh, brilliant, Sadia. Thank God for that.
I did say don't worry about it in this chat, but you probably didn't see it. It's okay.
Okay, fine.
Yeah,
fine.
Kenya wants to know what scripting is. So scripting is when the communication you give is from a script. It's from a script of a TV show or a song or something they've seen in an advert, or something they've heard on the radio. So it's like a whole sentence. So instead of, say, you know, if they've watched a TV program where, you know, Blue Bear bumped his knee, ouch, you know, that's what they'd say for whenever they were in pain. Blue Bear bumped his knee, ouch. Instead of this hurts, they would say Blue Bear bumped his knee, ouch. Does that make sense? So they repeat bits of movies or scripts that are, and it's always in context. It's beautifully in context. It's one of the most creative ways of communicating that I've ever come across in my life. I find it utterly charming, and incredibly sophisticated, actually. But it's, if you're not tuned in to where those scripts are coming from, it can look like this person is talking gibberish and that they're not communicating and that their communication isn't reciprocal. It looks like
they just say it's epilaic.
Yeah,
often.
Yeah, it looks like they're just parroting things that they've heard, but actually, if you listen to what it is, you go, hold on a second, that's in context. That she's talking about someone in pain. I need to find out where the pain is. I need to talk, I need to. So yeah, it's a really interesting way of communicating. I know what I was going to say before. In relation to what you said, Heather, the ADHD passion also comes with a need to rest.
Oh God, yes.
So, I think I was today years old. No, possibly the last couple of years. I'm nearly 50, where, I really realized, this is something else that we do at Genius Within, actually. So we have quite a lot of priorities around rest. And we try and reframe for ourselves that you rest in order to do your best work, rather than you work until you fall over and you have no choice but to rest. So a lot of us are kind of perfectionist, anxious perfectionists, like lots of neurodivergent people. We worry about our value because there were periods in our life where we were repeatedly told that we had no value. So we've internalized that lack of value. So as a result, we perform and we try to be human doings rather than human beings. Our worth is what we do, what we contribute. And so a lot of us work more than we need to, or we get on a passion project and we just carry on and carry on and carry on. And then we find ourselves in states of distress and poor health, where we really need to we need healthcare, and we need to do a big thing, and that's a pattern that all of us are working on undoing all the time. And oh my goodness, people, can I just tell you that it is not easy, and it doesn't matter how much of that we do for each other, and we legitimize each other resting. We praise each other when we rest. If one of us says, oh, do you know what, I went to an evening event last night and I'm going to come in late this morning, I'm going to take the dog for a walk and just chill until 10-11, people go, well done, that's a great idea. There's a huge kind of respectful culture, but it's still really hard to do it. It is still hard. It is so ingrained, that human performance as a way of being a human being. But yeah, I think that's, yeah, it's a tricky one, that. But given how much neurodivergent people need in terms of healthcare and rest and sleep support, I think it's really important to keep doing it.
If you don't, you end up with as many ailments as me, trust me. And I'm a lot.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I can count them. Yeah.
If I get any more sticky labels from the GP, I'll go insane. Oh, you've got diabetes, or you've got diabetic retinopathy, or you've got liver disease, or you've got, kidney disorder, God knows. And I think it's all from stress. That I think it's like you said, turning up for work. If it's my passion and my thing, I thought, I better be in by 8:30 to be ordered, to do this, to answer the phone, do everything, have it all the mail done, so I can really have a good conversation with this student, this person, whatever it is. And of course, bugger it wouldn't really matter. But in the end, the stress of my level of my post as a coordinator was that I went in every day for 7:45. I never finished before 8 at night. And I was there.
And that's no good for you. No.
Yeah, you're starting to get, you're getting your meetings out of sync, or you turn up to the wrong meeting at the wrong college or something mad, because there's only so much the brain can hold.
I think this is a common issue, Heather. So Linda, what do you've got? Put your hand up. What did you want to say?
Little bit what Heather was saying, really, about the stress levels and expectations at work. I tended, and I think individuals that I know who are neurodiverse tend to do one or two things: sleep a lot, sleep over targets, sleep to avoid targets, sleep because you've just shut down. So I think there is this balance of sleep. My sleep got so bad I had tests to see whether I had proper patterns or whatever. But for me, it was always linked to stress, and I would go through that stress period, and then my brain would insist upon shutting down, and I would need to sleep, and that would be offered at times which were not helpful. And I think that's also a common experience. So there's two sides to how our brains deal with that stress, and also the cortisone and the adrenaline that engenders. And it'd be a really interesting piece of research to look at you know, the impact of that stress, ulcers, blah blah blah, you know.
Well, did you
yeah,
have you seen the stress that have you seen the research that mothers of autistic children have
Yeah.
cortisol levels similar to combat veterans?
yes,
Oh God, yeah, my sister did that.
yeah,
I
yeah.
know, I know.
And I think there's also a question in the feed as well.
Yes, there is. Can I say more about the research unit at Genius Within? We don't have something that I call a research unit. So do you mean so the research that I do goes through Birkbeck, University of London. And but we use Genius Within as a case study at the moment. And within Genius Within, lots of us are doing research. So Genius Within has sponsored 2 PhDs, 5 master's degrees, 3 bachelor's degrees, all for neurodivergent individuals, all in the field of neurodiversity research, because we are trying to, and those qualifications tend to go through Birkbeck. I've got 5 PhD students, all of them are neurodivergent. One of them, Aishwarya, they are researching career transitions and early career burnout. Len is researching the intersection of race and neurodivergence in coaching relationships. Charlie is looking at disclosure. Lauren is looking, what's Lauren looking at? She's doing really cool stuff. She's looking at how coaching can support individuals to develop emotional intelligence. Like they are an amazing bunch of people. You can follow our research centre. You can be on our mailing list. Let me just put that in the chat for you. I'll put the research centre website in the chat, and then you can go and have a look. We've got all of our research is available on the website, and when we have resources at a moment's spare, we translate some of it into layperson's language and make infographics, which we don't always have time to do, but we try to do it whenever we can, because it's important to have the research be accessible. And that's obviously the thing that I know Catherine for, her absolute commitment to making research accessible. She is a total trailblazer. Oh, interesting, Kenya. Yeah. Yeah, you should definitely do a PhD looking at that. I'm happy to give you tips for doing a PhD. You need a PhD supervisor that you like. The PhD, yeah, PhD sink or swim based on the relationship you have with your supervisor. That is basically it. So I think we're kind of coming to a close, aren't we? I'm kind of we're nearly at the end, and thank you very much for listening. And I'd like to thank my little dog here for being incredibly well behaved all the way through that. She normally gets a bit grumpy at someone and starts barking, but she actually managed to keep herself quiet.
Are the treats helping?
The treats are always helping, James. The treats are always helping. And make sure I've got your address.
For sleeping. You know, when Andrew was saying, I was thinking, you know, get a dog.
That's a good idea, Andrew. Do get a dog. Dogs.
I mean, my dog's my saving grace. He makes me walk, so you have to go off your backside twice a day. For, you know, for humane reasons, you know, and then think about another being, you know, it's great.
One of my employees, Gunjan, did her master's degree on the use of dogs for supporting well-being in workplaces. How good is that? Yeah, we have all the dogs at work. There are 3 Labradors. There's my little yapper. But yes.
Would there ever be a treat that would be too unspeakable?
Oh, you've already sent me all the unspeakable treats, James. Those rabbit's ears, my husband wouldn't have them in the house. We had to send her into the garden with those. That was definitely an unspeakable treat. Brilliant.
In the same shop, there was items which I would describe as male cow plums.
No. Keep them to yourself. You mischievous dog fiend. Linda, did you have a closing statement as well?